request President NASSCOM, Mr. R. Chandrashekar, to address the gathering.
Dr. V.K. Saraswat, a member of the Niti Aayog and former Chief Scientific Advisor to the Raksha Mantri, the Defense Minister, Her Excellency Ms. Yael Hashavit, Consul General of Israel, Mr. Krishnamurthy, Chairman of AISA, Mr. Arun Kakatkar, MD of TE Connectivity, Mr. Rahul Gangal, partner of Roland Berger, dignitaries, distinguished delegates, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. This third Deftronics is unique in many ways. It's the first time that NASSCOM and AISA have actually come together to organize this event. It's also the first Deftronics which is being held after the Government of India publicly stated and announced its strategic goal of increased indigenization of defense supplies in the backdrop of a larger Make in India initiative that is being pursued. Even more importantly, government has recently spelt out very clearly its approach on how that strategic objective would be pursued, and more importantly, even more importantly, the role that it expects the industry to play in achieving that objective. So I would say that this is really the most appropriate time for all of us to discuss and deliberate on how the IT and electronics industry in the country and our friends from overseas and across the world can actually come together to help in achieving this national objective which the government has laid out before all of us. I think Mr. Krishnamurthy has already painted the canvas in front of you, but I would also like to reiterate that India is, not only the largest importer of defense equipment today, but it's also the 7th largest aerospace and defense market globally. And of course, this market is of strategic importance to any nation, and the budget is sizable and cuts across the requirements of the Army, Navy, and the Air Force. While on one side, the Defense Ministry emphasizes and acknowledges the need for India to increase its own capabilities and self-reliance in defense manufacturing and in capacities, the international industry today, including the defense industry, is completely global in nature, with a complex network of global supply chains, which in the case of defense are not necessarily completely open in all respects. Broader geopolitical dynamics can and do come into play, especially in core technology areas. The question therefore is, how do we address the need in this environment, in this market and business environment, and in an environment of rapidly changing technology? The report which Mr. Krishnamurthy had referred to, the NASSCOM AISA report on defense electronics and system design, which was prepared in partnership with Roland Berger. In this report, it has been projected that India's demand for electronics in aerospace and defense over the next decade or so will be of the order of $72 billion, as Mr. Krishnamurthy had said, of which platform electronics would be around $58 billion US. So the opportunity for electronics in India straddles both standalone systems as well as the subsystem level for other systems as well. While these are the market projections over the next 10 to 12 years, there could be further upsides in terms of the additional programs. And while these requirements are over a longer time horizon, the changing factor is the rapidity with which technology is evolving. So this opportunity can not only translate into a huge business opportunity for industry, as Mr. Krishnamurthy had said, but also I think it's a window to significantly scale up the technological capability that exists in our industries here, and to build on the capabilities that have already been accumulated, especially over the last couple of decades. The IT sector in particular in the last couple of decades has become widely known across the world. Its world-class capabilities and practices are now well recognized and appreciated. In May this year, I had actually led a NASSCOM delegation to Israel. You would be happy to know, and I'm sure you would be aware, Madam Consul General, that we had met many people in the industry and the government, including the Ministry of Defense in Israel. And what struck us and what struck the whole delegation was actually the critical role that defense had played in that country in building the industry, entrepreneurship, innovation, and capacity in that country. And we are all aware of the vital role that defense needs have played in evolving newer and more powerful technologies. And all of these technologies have had a tremendous impact on society, and a beneficial one at that. So it's not as if all defense needs are only related to greater and greater destructive capability. For example, the internet itself was an offshoot of a defense research project, as many of you would know, of the DARPA. And so in this backdrop, the question before all of us is how to bring together existing capability in the industry and future need in defense to raise our own capability, raise our game by an order of magnitude and not just incrementally as is happening. And this is the joint endeavor of both the government and the industry. So how do we leverage this need as a stimulus for the IT and electronics industry in the country to create and also help the defense PSUs and the government to create new products and new technologies? I think it has to be admitted that we as an industry and in the industry have not been doing so on a scale that is commensurate with a country of India's size and capability. Even though we have been a critical resource in helping other countries and other industries from across the world to do just that. So today the global defense industry is primarily dominated by a few original equipment manufacturers who work in close coordination with solution integrators, service providers, and design organizations from India through a well-defined supply chain. And the reason why OEMs and prime contractors prefer to work in India are because of the same reasons that has brought the global IT industry to India, namely the innovative capabilities, the scale, the time to market, the lower overhead costs, and the ability to learn and absorb new technologies with tremendous rapidity, and to evolve the skills that are required to drive these technologies. Consequently, in IT, within the broader IT BPM industry, the engineering R&D segment is globally known, and in our own strategic review of NASSCOM of the IT BPM industry, which we bring out in February every year, this segment, the engineering R&D, is one of the fastest growing verticals within the IT industry and is offering high value added engineering and design services to various sectors, including defense across the world. These capabilities may or may not be Indian, but they are surely here in India. The ER&D industry from India at an aggregate level has built capabilities for the global markets around aerostructures, engine systems, avionics, flight control systems, algorithm developments, routers, switches, supercomputers. I can just go on and on with a long list of areas where the industry has been working. And while the industry offers advantages such as a large talent pool and process orientation and the ability to move up the value chain, lower costs, etc., the fact is still that the defense sector has not so far been able to leverage this capability in any meaningful manner. In fact, this is actually true at a broader level, even in the context of Make in India. That today electronics is at the heart of almost every manufactured product and every defense equipment. And the heart of that lies also in the embedded software and design that goes into it. And these are the areas, these happen to be the areas of strength in India, and it would really be a shame if we were not able to leverage that for self-reliance in defense, and equally importantly, from a strategic perspective, control over technology and combat readiness, which is also critical. So while all these imperatives exist, the fact is that there is still substantial reliance on imports, notwithstanding all these objectives and statements. And these imports are in order to meet the capability gaps and capital needs. And the indigenous manufacturing base, which has historically been centered and built around the DPSUs and ordnance factories and the DRDO, is only now evolving to actually use and leverage all this capability which is sitting in the private sector right under their nose in the country, and to leverage it at an appropriate scale and depth. It's not that it was not leveraged earlier, but not at this kind of a scale or depth. The industry, IT industry alone, for example, is today a $150 billion behemoth and contributes almost half of the foreign exchange inflows into the country, and is a great, therefore, an extremely important factor in both our balance of payments and the financial stability of the country. Again, to elaborate a little bit on what Mr. Krishnamurthy mentioned about the discussions with the Defense Ministry and the Defense Minister. In fact, a task force had been constituted earlier, which comprised of industry members, defense PSUs, and representatives of NASSCOM and IESA, to really work out how industry and Ministry of Defense can collaborate, what are the capabilities that could be leveraged, what are the strategic capabilities that the industry is planning over the next 5 years, a few areas where industry can support technology absorption by the country, even under TOT arrangements which are entered into with foreign suppliers. What is the common infrastructure that is required, which the industry does not find viable as an investment at this point in time, and priority areas along the timelines that the MOD is looking at it. So these were some of the areas that group had looked at, and many of those inputs have also gone into the Roland Berger report as well. So this was the report which was presented, as again you heard Mr. Krishnamurthy saying, to the RM in a very elaborate meeting, and it was a real pleasure and a delight to see how much he was engaged in that discussion and the kind of immediate directions. In fact, all the recommendations that we made were accepted in principle, and directions were issued to the officials there to work out the further implementation modalities. This may not be the place or the time for me to go into all the details of the recommendations that we had made. I'm sure you will hear about some of them in the course of these couple of days. But we can certainly rest assured that these are now really being pursued not just with seriousness, but with a sense of urgency and vigor that was rarely seen in the past. But again, as a note of caution, I think keeping in mind the very different, I would say, cultures that prevail in the industry and in the government defense sector, because of the nature of the things that they do, not because they are, very fundamentally different. In defense, they tend to have a strategic view, a much longer term time horizon. Costs are secondary, technology objectives are primary. in the industry, I think timelines are much more shrunken. People want to look at a shorter time horizon. They want to look at the visibility of revenues. They want to look at certainty of the opportunity. So all of these will need to be bridged, and these are not small issues and problems when you're trying to build a bridge between these two. So a lot has to happen on both sides, and this has already begun. And in fact, the government has shared more information on what those needs are, and we believe that it should continue to share more information and treat the industry as a partner in building strategic capabilities. And also, I think it's important to address some of the apprehensions that industry has in investing in R&D. R&D investments in these areas tend to be lumpy, tend to have returns over longer term, and unless there is some visibility of the business that would ensue, it becomes difficult for such investments to be made. But thankfully, in the new DPP, the Defense Procurement Policy, government has, I think, made a very important step in, taken a very important step in that direction, and talks about reimbursing the development costs if RFPs are not issued. And industry certainly has to review the manner in which it assesses investment opportunities, return on investment and risk reward, how it is evaluated, so that it is now able to service the unique requirements and nationally important requirements of the defense sector. So, while recognizing the need to leverage the industry and its own requirements, government has brought in the new category of IDDM, that is indigenously designed and developed manufacturing as a category to encourage the industry to design, develop and manufacture. But there are several questions which would still need to be answered. Will this focus on technology capability? Is it about a particular weapon system? Is the industry ready to invest and deal with the uncertainties of R&D? So these kinds of questions abound, and I think that these are the questions which we hope will be addressed in the course of the deliberations over the next couple of days. But most importantly, I think industry needs to realize that there's a huge opportunity there. It's different from the kind of opportunities that exist in the market in general, but it's a much bigger opportunity in its own way, but requires a very different approach and a very different response. I'm sure that this event will help us as we chart out the course and move forward towards a stronger partnership between government and industry in this area. Thank you very much.